There's some huge news today. We are finally going to get a national review into Pakistani rape gangs. A new report by Baroness Casey revealed an over-representation of Pakistanis and Asian men. People in positions of power didn't want to do anything about it because they were worried about being called racist. I think it makes me sick that some people in government are now saying they're happy to have this inquiry. We all know what Sir Keir Starmer really thinks.
And when politicians, and I mean politicians, who sat in government for many years, are casual about honesty, decency, truth and the rule of law, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
Well, then today he says this.
I asked Louise Casey to look again, do an audit to see if there's anything that had been missed. She's carried out that audit, she's presented that to me, I've read it in full, and on the basis of what she's found, she says there should be a national inquiry. I've looked at her report, I've considered that material, I think she's right, and that's why there'll be a national inquiry.
He's just such a lawyer, isn't he? Stevie Wonder could see that Pakistani men were raping and abusing working-class white girls on an industrial scale, but Sir Keir Starmer needs to hide behind a report. Get a look at this MP.
The reason we did a local-based review was because the then Home Secretary Amber Rudd and the then local government minister Rishi Sunak refused to provide a statutory inquiry into Telford. And that's why we worked together with the Police and Crime Commissioner, who happens to be a Conservative, and people from across the political spectrum to take this out of the party political field and try and find answers in our small part of the world.
Right, turns out that was all rubbish, because if you look at this letter, when he worked for the Telford Council, he specifically asked not to have an inquiry, right? So it's just ridiculous that where do these people get off now, you know? Shall we spare a thought for former darling of the BBC, Emily Maitlis?
Do you not think, Emily, there's an issue with Pakistani Muslims raping working-class white underage girls? Do you not think there's an issue there?
I think there is an appalling issue with grooming when it hits any community and any age. We only ever hear you talk about Pakistani perpetrators.
Are you telling me there's no issue?
I'm telling you that you are focusing on Pakistani grooming gangs because probably you're racist and you don't believe that there are white perpetrators of the same crime. Can you deny that?
Yeah, I mean, that aged really badly, didn't it? It's no wonder the media ignored it. I mean, look at this from the BBC today. They published a report about the key findings of the Casey report, and they ignored one of the key findings. They only added the word Pakistani once they got caught out. It's mad, isn't it? Police had been deliberately not recording the ethnicity of rape gang members. They just tried to hide it from us. And now Yvette Cooper has revealed that illegal immigrants might be at it.
Secondly, Baroness Casey reports that she came across cases involving suspects who were asylum seekers. We have asked her team to provide to the Home Office all the evidence that they found, so the immigration enforcement can immediately pursue individual cases with the police. But let me make clear, those who groom children or who commit sexual offences will not be granted asylum in the UK. We will do everything in our power to remove them.
It's going to be devastating for Labour. I think Labour are probably absolutely up to their necks in it. The abuse seems to have basically all happened in Labour-run areas. The very community that Labour courted, the Pakistanis, are overrepresented. Some of the very people Labour told us were enriching our lives are actually aggressive, prolific paedophiles. The public will never forget that Labour have tried to do everything to avoid that national inquiry. Sir Keir Starmer has been forced into it. I think he cares more about not seeming racist than he does about working-class white girls being abused. So get ready, Sir Keir, because this inquiry might take about 3 years. So could be out just in time for the next election. Let's get the thoughts of my panel, journalist Emily Sheffield. We've also got political commentator Andy Swells and former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. OK, so, Jake, Do you think Keir Starmer's been forced into this? It's quite a significant U-turn, isn't it?
Well, look, I think it absolutely has. I think once this report, which landed apparently on his desk 10 days ago, once they read the first few paragraphs of this report, they realised that despite their attempts to avoid this this investigation, that they weren't going to be able to avoid it. But what makes me really angry about it is, first of all, they got the report 10 days ago. They could have chosen any day of the week to have this announcement publication report. That is in the government's gift. The Prime Minister scuttled off to the G7 to hide in Canada so he didn't have to face up to this in this House of Commons. Really unusual for a report this important not to be fronted by the Prime Minister. And the reason I think he did that...
They also waited till Iran and Israelis started
and the reason I think he did that...
And then they tried to slip it in. And it's true, it didn't dominate the news this weekend, and it would have done. It would have seriously dominated the news. The Number 10 press office, quite frankly, I'd like to drag them out. They were the ones that were putting out that line that, sorry to break in, but the Alexis...
you normally do.
The Alexis J report... That was I was on the BBC quite a lot of the time writing about it. The Number 10 press office were coming out with using the excuse that the Alexis J report had fully covered this and had not called for an inquiry, and why the government hadn't accepted the recommendations. Well, they did accept the recommendations. A lot of them were implemented. The Tories, in fact, spent years locking up many of these perpetrators, and all Number 10 did was try and throw it back in everyone's face, including reporters like myself and every single person who was calling for inquiry, including victims, and say that Alexis J had covered it. No, she hadn't. The huge report she did covered child abuse across the whole country in every single spectrum. It had not covered in any great detail, and they continually... I remember sitting in the BBC studio and even the host, plumbing this Number 10 line at me and having to literally get into a fight with the host on the BBC to say, no, you are parroting the Number 10 line right now. I've read all those reports. I've read every single police report, unlike a lot of people who talk about it. And it was a massive pushback by Number 10. So Keir Starmer, I think he's looking pretty uncomfortable, and I'm really glad, because this was all about his male pride. It was about him being called out and him not being but I was the guy who led all the inquiries. His pride now will be absolutely shot to pieces, and then they try and sneak this out when there's a war going on, and I hope he suffers. I really hope he suffers quite a lot of humiliation, because it's absolutely nothing to what those girls had to suffer.
Gosh, strong stuff.
So a failure on his part.
Andy, I'll bring you in. I made a comment there about, I think that Keir Starmer maybe cares a bit more about potentially being called racist than he actually does care for these working class, mostly white girls who are being abused. Do you disagree with that?
I think I would, because, obviously the man behind Keir Starmer, Morgan McSweeney, for years, for the better part of probably 7 or 8 years, this has been a core issue and a core piece of anger that he's had at the Labour Party, at the local government within the Labour Party. And I think, this is Morgan's view, Morgan's kind of way of life, sneaking into Starmer's. I think this, this report and the, subsequent inquiry is absolutely what the Labour Party should be doing. The Labour Party should be standing up for the working class of this country. And I think this is actually what Keir Starmer should be doing, and I'm really quite happy that he was.
He was there just a few weeks ago when they refused to have the inquiry.
Well, they were waiting until the report came out.
Rotherham tweeted out over the weekend, I'm just so pleased the government's finally agreed to have an inquiry. She voted against it just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, that wasn't actually an inquiry. That was something that the amendment suggested an inquiry.
Hypocrisy. Why are they?
If they voted the amendment through, then it would have killed the bill.
The Prime Minister's scuttled away to Canada. You've got Labour MPs, including the one from Telford, you brilliantly picked up there. Congratulations to GB News calling out the hypocrisy on that. Keir Starmer has got lots of questions to answer about his personal role, because he was, of course, head of the Crown Prosecution Service. He never tires of telling us that he was this country's chief prosecutor, and the Crown Prosecution Service, not him, I don't think he had any direct knowledge of it, but the Crown Prosecution Service is called out for real criticism. And the real tragedy of this is the announcement of this public inquiry will kill any debate about this issue for the next 3 years, because the government will say, whenever you put a question to them, I'm sorry, there's a public inquiry, we have to let it run its course.
We do have to let them run the course.
But what they have done is they've stifled any debate about this.
Is that why your government didn't call a national inquiry?
I think 3 years is too long. Kemi Badenoch said you could do it in 2.
Why didn't she do it when she was Women's Minister?
Well, Kemi Badenoch did campaign about this.
But she was Women's Minister, why didn't she call it?
Campaign for an inquiry. It's simply not true to say she didn't campaign.
Not hard enough, seemingly.
But can we go back? There was a reason why this came up again. The Conservatives, if you look back, if you have read the reports as I have...
Yeah, I read it this afternoon.
No, not this report.
What, the Alexis J report?
No, and previous that. The council reports, the police reports. There were years of very, very good investigations. And she brings up, Casey, today, a very good point, which, again, I was trying to raise back over Christmas and in January. Most of these recommendations that were made to the police, the council, care homes, most of those have not been taken up, even these early ones.
Yeah.
No one went back to it. And the reason this came up again was because Oldham Council this time contacted their MP and said, we need an inquiry. We still realise we have not fixed this. At that point, what was stopping Labour? What do you think stopped them? Why do you think they want to look into these Labour areas and call for a proper inquiry?
Let's elaborate on that a little bit, because there is a concern that maybe some local Labour politicians are up to their necks in this, either knew about things, didn't report them, maybe all of that. So there's that issue, isn't there? The other issue I wonder for Labour, and is the demographic stuff. So I mean, if it is what we think it is, what we believe it is, which is that basically Pakistani men are way overrepresented in this thing, Labour's going to have to face up to that, aren't they? With their kind of view on multiculturalism and mass immigration.
Well, I would
actually, it's not been that enriching.
I would encourage Keir Starmer to throw those councillors out the Labour Party, and I would hope that the police in those various areas would imprison them, if nothing else. I think those people have to go and have no place in the Labour Party or standing in public office. I think from a demographic issue, it is
an issue. Why are you going to believe that Keir Starmer is the right person to lead on this at all? I mean,
he's the democratically elected Prime Minister of the country.
But he's not. He should not be the voice on this. I know he's a democratic leader, but for me to look to him and think, oh, he's the guy that's going to... He's
not going to lead the inquiry. He's not going to chair the inquiry.
Yes, but he's the one now coming out going, oh, yeah, we've got to have it. He's been dragged to this point.
Correct.
Dragged. And I'm sorry, the only thing that stopped him back in January, which the easiest thing in the world to have just gone, yeah, OK, let's have an inquiry, was his male pride. His male pride.
That's ridiculous. He commissioned the report in February, so he did take swift action. Like, did you actually...
Not what he wanted, though, is it, literally, I think?
I mean, none of us know Keir Starmer. I think, he probably doesn't like the systematic rape of young, white, working-class girls. I think he probably wants that to end and just victims to get justice. The man who, the first person to ever prosecute grooming gangs in this country. I think his track record does speak for himself.
Turns out, as it happens, he keeps saying that.
It turns out politics...
It turns out there were a load of other grooming gangs as well, and he didn't do anything about that.
Not young white girls. He cared more about the politics of it.
Where?
He didn't want to be shown
he commissioned the report. He's announced a national inquiry. He's accepted and implementing all the recommendations of this report.
He could have just done an inquiry there and then. It was obvious, and to all of us it was obvious. It was obvious to Oldham.
To have this. So any normal human being would surely look at this and go, wow, dozens, and maybe, up to 100, well, in fact, hundreds of young girls have been raped. Do you think a normal... forget the fact he's a politician. You think a normal human being would say, 800 girls have been raped. I need someone to have a report to tell me about whether this is a national scandal and we should have an inquiry. Any normal person would look at that when the call for the inquiry came out from Oldham Council, from these Labour councils, and go, do you know what, let's do it. And that's in his power, and he didn't do it.
Is Keir Starmer's instincts wrong? I mean, there was a brilliant report actually by Harry Cole, a column in The Sun, where he said that apparently what he does is he goes and takes himself off and reads all his documents and his briefcase and all this stuff. And doesn't really make decisions based on what people are telling him to do, like have a national inquiry.
Well, he's a rationalist, isn't he? That's what most barristers are. They'll read the documents, read the the objective facts that have been briefed to them, and then they'll make decisions based off of that. It's just the way he operates. It's how he's been so successful.
But then he gets it wrong, doesn't he?
I don't think this is wrong at all. He waited until he commissioned a report, waited for the report to come out, and I think he's made the right decision implementing the recommendations of the Casey report.
Okay. All right. Well, there we go.